Hello, everyone. My name's Rach. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic and addict. Thank you, Sky, for your service. Thank you all for being here. We're on week 2, so we're very early into the book. And last week, we just covered those initial first pages. We got into this beautiful mindset of the power of this book. The name of the book study has come from We Agnostics. It's on page 56. Infinite power and love. And just to define the word infinite, because I'm a little bit wordy, limitless or endless in space, extent, or size, impossible to measure or calculate. So infinite power and love. And so we just went through those first couple of pages, the blank page at the front. We went to page 44 to qualify ourselves or our sponsees with those 2 questions. If when we honestly want to, we cannot quit entirely, or if when we start drinking, we cannot control the amount we take. And then we went over the contents page and what the beautiful AA recovery symbol means. Those 3 legacies: recovery, unity, and service, and surrounded by that infinite circle. Every time I go around my steps with a newcomer, I have a new experience myself. It doesn't matter how many times I read the magic book, I'm going to have a new experience each and every time. That's the power, that's the magic of this book. And it's guaranteed to lead me and the person I'm taking, if they follow it fearlessly and thoroughly, it promises we're guaranteed to have a spiritual awakening, a psychic change as the result of these steps. So we went over the preface, which started off with like a massive first paragraph giving us the statistics of the books that have been sold. So if anybody is a bit doubtful as to whether this may work and all the rest of it, let's look at the statistics. We've got millions and millions of books being sold, people studying this literature all around the world. And I'll just skim read the first paragraph of the foreword to the first edition, because that's where we left off last week. So we're on page XIII, foreword to the first edition. This is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered, past tense, from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And all the way through the book, we're going to try to look at these threads. We're going to try to highlight in our minds, in our hearts, in our experiences of where it keeps on telling us the same thing. In the mind and body, it keeps on telling me mind and body. And then it says to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So I won't go into this paragraph too much just because we did it last time. I'll just read over it. But what a powerful statement in that first paragraph. They're going to show us precisely, exactly, specifically. And I love to kind of keep it. This is why I'm such a big book lover, is because if I follow the clear-cut direction, I'm guaranteed to get the result everybody else is talking about that will set me free and allow me to live a life not without pain or fear or challenges, lifey challenges, but I won't ever need to pick up a drink or drug again. That's been proven. So for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. And throughout the book, it kind of tells us, doesn't it? When we're doubtful, do we go elsewhere? Am I trying to read other books? Am I trying to find an easier, softer way? It says here from the off, no further authentication will be necessary. So we're looking for that identification. And I see myself in this book. Do I understand that this is what I suffer with, this illness? So we think this account of our experiences, that's what we've all got. They're all different. They're all unique to us, but our common problem stays the same. and our common solution stays the same, no matter how different our experience looks, how that looks. So it will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, not bad, sick. And besides, we are sure our way of living. So we always like highlight, make it pop on the page, way of living. This is a way of life. It's not just a quick fix to get me well so that I can go on my merry way. And the quicker I can delve into this mindset of this is a way of life for me, the easier it will be for me to get into it and then hopefully be able to maintain it, because I fully understand step one. And just for anybody that's new, you're so welcome. Step one is we admitted that we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. So we're always going to tie in the steps as we go through the book together. So this is where we left off. It is important that we remain anonymous because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Being mostly business or professional folk, we could not well carry on our occupations in such an event. We would like, so they haven't got the traditions yet because this is in 1939, but they're saying anonymity, this whole paragraph, this whole bit is all about anonymity. And they're thinking this is going to be overwhelming. We can't out ourselves. They still didn't really know what was going on with, they knew that it worked, but they were testing here that, how this was going to, they had no idea of how big it was going to get. So we would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation, which means a hobby or a minor occupation. So obviously our fellowship has changed, the times have changed. There are however many rehabs and institutions nowadays that they didn't have before. And there are many people who work in the field. I work in the field partly as well. So an avocation, minor hobby, my understanding of this bit is that it always needs to be for fun and for free. I don't know the exact statistics of people that actually relapse when they work in treatment, but I've heard that the statistics are so high because if somebody goes into working in treatment and actually thinks that their job is their recovery, it's very, very dangerous. A lot of the relapse rates for support workers and people working in recovery is huge. So for fun and for free, we could work in treatment, but as long as we do this, because it's a spiritual program, can't be paid to take somebody through the work, or I can, but I don't know how that's going to work out. That's why the traditions came about, because how many people have tried to monetize this? Quite sickening, really, how many people try to, and actually, when newcomers come in, we're all a bit bonkers. We all think, oh, I could make money out of this. Well, not we all, sorry, I shouldn't speak for anyone else. So when writing or speaking publicly about alcoholism, we urge each of our fellowship to omit his personal name, to leave his personal name out, designating himself instead as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So the traditions haven't come into play yet, but this sounds a little bit to me like tradition 6 and tradition 10. I'm just going to read it out just because it's wonderful to tie in the traditions to the literature in the book, because it's so important. Without the traditions, the groups wouldn't be healthy. Where would we go? The newcomer wouldn't have anywhere to go. So tradition 6 is an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. And then tradition 10 is Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. Because it's saying about speaking publicly and alcoholism, we leave out our name. And then it says very earnestly, so really seriously, we ask the press also to observe this request, for otherwise we shall be greatly handicapped. Again, anonymity, anonymity. And we go on to learn the danger of people associating and speaking for AA or CA. If they pick up, if they behave badly, if things don't go well, then you are seen to represent a fellowship. We are just humble members, right? We're servants. So we are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. Conventional meaning, you know, what's generally done. We're completely different. They go on to say there are no fees or dues whatsoever. So that's our tradition 7. I might not read all the traditions because it might get a little bit long. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. So that's tradition 3. They've taken out the word honest in tradition 3. And it says the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. And back then, I don't know if this word honest was taken out because in early recovery, it can be really challenging for people to be honest. I don't know if I want to stop drinking or using. Actually, I don't. I just want the consequences to stop. So in my original book, I've got sincere next to that honest. But there's our 3rd tradition. And I've also put a question mark after that. Do I have a sincere desire? Because that's the only requirement. And throughout the book, whenever I read the book with a sponsee, I'm always asking them, even when we get to the 12th step, do you want this? Do you want to be recovered? Do you want sobriety? Is this something you want? My sponsor always said to me, listen out, Rach, when somebody says, I need this, instead of I want this, they have very different meanings. I need it kind of implies that I've got to do it because, you know, the consequences are so bad. I want this is like a willingness, right? And we need that willingness. So we are not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. Again, I just put tradition 10 and 6 next to that bit. I won't read them again, but you can look them up if you want afterwards. Here we go. I love this thread throughout the whole book. We simply wish to be helpful. And I'll put tradition 5 next to that. I will read tradition 5. Has got one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. My primary purpose is to stay clean and sober and help another alcoholic or addict to recovery. So we simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. And that theme of helpfulness, wow. When I started seeing it, I couldn't believe that I had missed it so many places in the book. And it's right here in the foreword to the 1st edition. We shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book, particularly those who have commenced work with other alcoholics. I've squiggly underlined that. Commenced work with other alcoholics. How do I get to keep this thing? I have to give it away. It's subtly telling me from the very beginning. If we think about these people that have stayed in for decades and decades, what are they all doing? They're all giving this stuff away. They're showing up, and remember those legacies, you know, recovery, unity, service, that's service, giving back. We should like to be helpful to such cases. There's that word again. And in another book study that I do, we really break down the words. I never noticed that the word helpful, if you break it down in half, it's like full of help. Helpful. How do I get whole? I get full of help, full of use. I like these little things that I never used to think about it. So selfish, just help me. I don't want to be helpful unless I'm going to get rewarded for it, unless I'm going to get seen for it. So inquiry by scientific, medical, and religious societies will be welcomed. Alcoholics Anonymous. So there's no real fellowship yet. They've launched the book and they're really hoping that this is going to help people. So we'll jump straight into the foreword to the second edition. And the foreword to the second edition is basically just a big history. They're going to tell us about what happened at the beginning, how AA was formed. So I've put history next to the foreword to the second edition. Figures given in this foreword describe the fellowship as it was in 1955, so 16 years on. Since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. I squiggly underlined that wholesale miracle. Wholesale meaning on such a massive scale. Now, this was back in the day, only 16 years on from the first edition. But now we can look at it like this is global. This has gone all around the world, and a miracle is like it's divine, isn't it? It's not human. It's angelic, it's amazing, it's unbelievable. A wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. Isn't that beautiful? That's what they hoped. And now if we think about it, how many in-person meetings there are all around the world. And because of the pandemic, we now have Zoom meetings. I know that there are some recovery meetings that are 24/7, and they've been going for years. Imagine finding service 24/7 for a meeting. It's unbelievable what people do, show up and do service. It's incredible. So find the fellowship. So already continues the early text. 2s, 3s, and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities. 16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups. That's a lot of groups. From the original 100 or 82 people, this is mushroomed into 6,000 groups, whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. ED, I've circled the ED. This is past tense, recovered. This is what it says in the book. This is what's possible. I have a daily reprieve. I can never be cured of alcoholism, but I can recover. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and all of the provinces of Canada. AA has flourishing communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries and US possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying that this is but a beginning. Only the augury of a much larger future ahead. So an augury means a projection, an omen. It's really, I love thinking back to how they thought about this and now the scale of recovery, how beautiful that is. And when I read this with a sponsee, I get lit up about it. I get excited about it, thinking this was them back in the day and look at what we're a part of now. I believe that the delivery of how, because at the beginning, we spoke about this in the last meeting, at the beginning when I came into recovery, who cares? Who cares about the preface and the foreword and the second? I don't want to know about the history. I'm not into it. But something happens when you learn that this thing is magic and that it works. And to pass on that enthusiasm is like, whoa. I mean, I used to get confused even about why my sponsor was so lit up about it until I felt it. So the spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June 1935. So a very special day, June the 10th. I've just put 10th above that. That's our Founders' Day. During a talk between a New York stockbroker, so they're talking about Bill Wilson, and an Akron physician, they're talking about Dr. Robert Smith. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession. So underneath 6 months, I've put a little like line, and I've put Ebby was 2 months sober. Ebby was just 2 months sober, and he went to see Bill, and saying now that 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience. And I always love to highlight in the book where it says suddenly, at once, immediately, because I find it really hopeful, not just to a newcomer who is new to recovery, but actually, if there's anybody who's in and out, maybe can't stop relapsing and thinking this is never going to work for me, it tells me in the book that this can happen suddenly. It can happen immediately if I'm 100% in, if I'm 100% committed, if I understand step one fully, that without this, I have no hope. I have to pursue this with all of the desperation of a drowning person. So was suddenly, let me just go back. So the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. So this is talking about Ebby Thatcher, which was an old pal of Bill Wilson. And he was like the drunk friend that we've all had that's like, if I ever get that bad, then I need to get some help. Not realizing that actually we probably passed that person, but couldn't see it because of the delusion of my own illness. So, and the Oxford group was, it's a Christian organization founded in 1921 by Lutheran priest Frank Bookman. So it was later called the Moral Rearrangement Group, and they were an evangelical group. And I don't know why I always sort of think of them as like the Samaritans today, you know, a religious group of people who just wanted to help people. And so they were amazingly kind, lovely people, and they used to host meetings called the Drunk Squad back in the day. And unfortunately, what happened with I mean, I'm not an expert about the Oxford group. There's probably people in this group that know far more than me. But my understanding was that their mistake was the fact that they wanted to help so many people that they kind of spread themselves too thinly. And out of that experience, that's what came our singleness of purpose. That's why it became really important that we only stick to helping who we can help with the condition that we can help them with out of this book. So the Oxford group of that day, he had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth. Oh, what an amazing man. A New York specialist in alcoholism who is now accounted no less than a medical saint. No less than a medical saint. This wonderful man, I'll show you a picture of him in a minute. Medical saint by AA members, whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. So we're going to go into Dr. Silkworth and you know, his contribution to our amazing fellowship and his incredible work that he did. But it's telling us early on that he has been a fundamental part, and he's no less than a medical saint. Now, this is a key piece of information here. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Grave meaning fatal. So there's lots of pieces of the puzzle which are just brilliant to kind of work it out as we go along. And Dr. Silkworth gave us this key piece of information. Without a spiritual solution, I am in grave danger. And is that our experience? Yeah, it is. Without a power greater than me, I am completely powerless. The love of my own children is not enough. I have an obsession of my mind. I have an allergy of my body. I have a spiritual malady that makes me feel restless, irritable, and discontented, no matter what my external condition looks like. Everything could be fine. So this grave nature of alcoholism, and it's a key piece of information, though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford group. So a tenet is like a rule or a commandment. Remember, the Oxford group was a religious organization, and what we have is not a religious organization. So though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford group, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory. So that's above that, I've put step 4 and step 10. Our morals are our code, right? Our ethics. If you think about my illness, it leads me to be an unlovely creature. I do things, I say things, I behave in a certain way that without this discipline, without this checking myself, without this inventory, without this fact-finding, fact-facing, I stay completely selfish and self-centered, and I carry on in my old ways of being. So it's saying, even from back then, this is how the steps were formed. They had these tenets, and I'll show you what they were in a minute. Moral inventory, so that's step 4 and step 10. We made a fearless moral inventory of ourselves, and step 10 continued to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. Confessions of personality defects, well, that's our step 5. Restitution to those harmed, that's our step 9. Here we go, there's that beautiful word again, helpfulness. I'm going to be full of help to others. That's our step 12. And the necessity. And a necessity is an absolute must, isn't it? It's essential, it's fundamental, it's crucial, it's non-negotiable. The necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. Now, at first I had 2 and 3 written there. Steps 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as we understood him. But actually, this is also step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove our shortcomings. Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our defects of character. And step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and for the power to carry that out. So there's all those steps in there, but you could say that the necessity of belief in God could encompass all of the steps. But that word dependence is quite powerful as well, isn't it? Because it means I need to rely on, I have a need for this dependence upon God. And whatever that means to you. So if you're new in and the word God freaks you out, speak to people about it. I know a lot of people that it freaked out at the beginning, myself included. But God is just a word, it's just a 3-letter word, and it resembles whatever that means to you, a power greater than yourself. So prior to his journey to Akron, the broker, Bill Wilson, had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. So I've squiggly underlined, had worked hard with many alcoholics. What's the key to me keeping my sobriety? It's giving it away. Do you know anyone who has worked a program but left out the 12th step? How has it gone down? Maybe you have had that experience. How does it feel? How does it work? Does it work? Because I know a lot of people that have said it just doesn't work. If it was an 11-step program, it'd be an 11-step program. You know, the paradox of this program is that the selfishness and self-centeredness needs to be overcome with this helpfulness that doesn't come from me. It comes from my grave alcoholism that brought me to my knees, that may put me in a position of beat me into a state of reasonableness. So Bill Wilson worked hard with many alcoholics. And then the other bit of information is that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. So again, it's telling me from the forward to the second edition. And it reiterates that thread all the way throughout the book. It says, if there was an easier, softer way. It says that we lie to the medical professionals. We lie to our friends and family. People don't understand the illness. How is it that a random stranger armed with the facts has been able to help me recover from alcoholism like nothing else? That's the way it works. Only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. So, but he had succeeded only in keeping himself sober. So this is another key piece of information. Those people that Bill Wilson was trying to work with, he didn't get them sober. He was going into bars and dragging people off bar stools and saying, oh my God, I found a solution. We found God. I've got these 12 steps. You need to do this. You need to do this. Does that work for an alcoholic or addict? You need. Oh, hell to the no. So Dr. Silkworth ended up saying to Bill, stop telling people what they need to do and start sharing the experience that you had. And that's that identification, isn't it? That step one, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. When I heard somebody in a meeting sharing about their experience and talking about this powerlessness and unmanageability, I was like, yeah, I felt it. I felt the power in goosebumps going, whoa, that's weird. That stranger is talking about how I feel and what I experience. So the key here that Bill Wilson found very early on is that by helping another alcoholic, he kept himself sober. Absolutely fundamental, no beating around the bush. We can't avoid it, can't evade it. This is what we need to do. And the broker had gone to Akron on a business venture which had I just heard myself say this is what we need to do, but I just heard myself going, we need, sorry, I need, you can do what you want. I'll just tell you what works for me. Sorry. I get a bit overexcited. So the broker had gone to Akron on a business venture which had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. I've got a sign. It is amazing. full of sparkle. I'm going to power it out at you. I'm going to get it out at every opportunity, because it says in the book, and we talk about this in recovery, this is a suggested program, where they're only suggestions, and they are suggestions, but they're only going to work if we take action. There's things that we must do. Let's pay attention to the clear-cut direction. It's saying from the forward to the second edition, to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. Service. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician. How beautiful. I just wanted to show a couple of slides to anyone who is newer in. I always encourage sponsees, when I read all of this bit of the book, I say to people, do you know what Bill Wilson looks like? Because I didn't know for ages. I was sitting in meetings talking about the founders and the book and the steps. I had no clue who it was, like what they looked like. So here is one of our, our co-founder, Bill Wilson, alcoholic, just like us. And then we've got lovely Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. I love this picture of them smiling, thinking of them, helping each other, and then going out, helping the world. And then we've got a picture of Ebby. So there's Ebby Thatcher with Bill Wilson. And he's the guy that came over at 2 months sober after being saved from alcoholic, he was going to get locked up for alcoholic insanity. The Oxford group said, let us take him. We can help him find God. And Ebby came and spoke to Bill about these 6 tenets that he'd learned. And that's what ended up forming. Then we've got Dr. William D. Silkworth, this lovely old man. He wasn't an alcoholic. He dedicated his whole life and career to patiently and repetitively working with us time and time again after, can you imagine all of the lies, the pain? He talks about it. He says, you sit here for a while in the firing line. You see the despairing wives and children. You stand here with them and see. And then we've got the 6 tenets of the Oxford group. So complete deflation. It says, doesn't it, on page 14, it says, simple but not easy. A price has to be paid. Destruction of self-centeredness. And then on page 25, it says, nobody likes the leveling of our pride. The successful consummation, we have to have this complete deflation, that hopelessness, that willingness to take on what's being offered to us. And then we've got dependence on God. That means reliance on God. And it should seem so simple, right? If I think about it, whenever I depend on myself, I always end up in pain. But yet I still sometimes forget that I need to depend on God. Moral inventory, confession, restitution, and continued work with others in need. So as we're in the forward to the second edition, this gives us a little bit of history about how our steps were, how they were created, all of these magic pieces to the puzzle. So we're just on the bottom of page XVI. This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. So Dr. Bob, his wife Anne, was a part of the Oxford group. Dr. Bob had been going to the Oxford group and praying for 2.5 years. So it's what I get from all of this bit of, well, what I get from the big book, whenever I reread it and find it, is that I need to accept all of the program. If I'm just praying and meditating and not doing inventory, or if I'm just depending on God, but not, not doing 6 and 7, asking for my character defects to be removed, I'm not going to get the full package. On page 133, it talks about God wanting us to be happy, joyous, and free. And that's over all the way in step 12, page 133. So we have to go through all of these steps, embrace them all. The quicker I can get into it and go, do you know what? I'm just going to learn from everybody's experience. If I try to cut corners, I'm going to make it harder for myself. That's been my experience. And I always ask people to ask themselves if that's their own experience as well. So Dr. Bob had tried spiritual means, but had failed because he didn't have the clear-cut direction yet. Another alcoholic hadn't come and told him the grave nature of what he suffers with. So then it says, but when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, so that bit I've squiggly underlined that, and its hopelessness, because that was a bit that I used to miss out, actually. In recovery, I, love talking about the solution and don't love so much talking about the problem. But actually, it tells me in the book and in working with others, it says if I miss that key fact, then people might skip to the solution and not understand the grave nature of their illness. I need to be smashed that message that this is hopeless. If I keep on trying, if I've got that delusion that I can still enjoy and control my drinking, I'm going to keep on going. Yeah, I can try again. I can try again. So, and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. So something happened in the magic of one alcoholic working with another. Now, if you are already sponsoring, you will hopefully have felt that magic, that addictive magic of the power of one alcoholic helping another. And I love it that it says spiritual remedy. A remedy refers to a kind of like softer, homeopathic, like healing kind of. It's not clinical, it's not synthetic. It's like we've got a spiritual remedy, and a malady means a disease or a disorder, serious problem, an illness. So that he began to heal from this illness with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. Isn't that gorgeous to think that Bill had gone over to Dr. Bob to do service, to work his 12th step like Ebby had for him, and that changed Dr. Bob's life, and here we are today, 85 years on, sitting on a meeting on a Friday night on a Zoom meeting together, studying this amazing literature. Blows my mind. He sobered, never to drink again, up to the moment of his death in 1950. So here's another promise. We never, ever, ever have to drink again or use again. I can be recovered until the day I die, if I stick with it. So this seemed to prove, and I've squiggly underlined prove, that one alcoholic could affect another alcoholic, could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. So the reason I squiggly underlined that prove is because I always love to go back to the facts and the evidence of this program. I always talk about this, so forgive me if you've heard it, but I know there are newer people on the meeting. Let's look at the evidence of what works and what doesn't. It doesn't matter how people say the story. It doesn't matter how they sing their song. Everybody says the same thing. I was powerless. I had no control over picking up or the amount that I took. I ended up working a program. I worked these 12 steps. I was shown how to give it away. I don't need to make up the solution. I don't need to guess what the spiritual remedy is. I don't need to be qualified. I don't need to have any. My only qualification is that I am an alcoholic or an addict and I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And then all I need to do is read the book with someone. And what it says early on, forward to the second edition, is this seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no other non-alcoholic could. If I could go and pay for therapy and sit with a counselor for an hour and not be an alcoholic anymore, people would do it. It doesn't work for the real alcoholic. It needs this solution. And that's why anyone who is scared of sponsoring, because I believe that everyone is, no one feels ready or qualified. I don't know, maybe some people do feel like, yeah, I can't wait to do it. But a lot of people do feel nervous about it. But it's telling me very early on, this is something that must be done if I want to stay well. So then we've got a powerhouse of a sentence here. This is like highlighted, it's boxed off. It also indicated that strenuous work. What does strenuous work mean? It means that I am going to be inconvenienced. It means that it's going to take great effort on my part. I'm going to need to put somebody else's needs ahead of my own. That's not my natural nature. That's me going against everything. But this is what it takes. It says, it also indicated that strenuous work. So for me, that means not just pinging a message over, like spending the day doing whatever I want to do, and then pinging a message to a newcomer, are you okay, babe? Because that, I remember being a newcomer, we lie, we go, yeah, I'm okay. We're not okay, we're dying, but we don't know how to talk about the problems. We think we're, there's strenuous work, going out of my way, sitting down with someone, doing a step 5, reading this book with someone. Strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. So this means that without it, vital means life-giving. It's the opposite of grave. Dr. Silkworth is talking about the grave nature of alcoholism. If I don't take action, step 1 is that my life is unmanageable. My thinking is unmanageable. I'm actually insane without kind of getting back on the track of God. I very quickly go insane unless I do inventory, send it to my sponsor, do step 10s, talk to my tribe. I can be completely delusional, even in my sobriety. So was vital to permanent recovery. And I've put a big question mark. Do I want permanent recovery? Have you relapsed before? How did it feel coming back to day 1 after you had some time? Was it harder to get back in? I've heard the saying, it's easier to stay sober than to get sober. So do I want permanent recovery? Because it's telling me straight away, it's told me twice on the other page, it said he must carry his message to another alcoholic. And then it's telling me, it also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. So I'm like, right, this is serious. They're telling me from the very beginning, and they tell me throughout the book. So hence the 2 men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of Akron City Hospital. I love to imagine, you know, we just saw that picture of Bill and Bob, like standing next to each other. I love to think of that penny drop moment. Bill Wilson has been trying to drag drunks off spa stools. Come on, you don't need to drink. I found a solution. I found God. This is what you need to do. You need. Didn't work. He was going to pick up in Mayflower Hotel because his business deal crashed. He needed to do something. He found Dr. Bob. They worked together. Dr. Bob got well and something clicked. This is what I need to do. And they frantically set out. So again, I like to kind of generate some enthusiasm and some gusto with, let me get to work. They're telling me very early on what I need to do. Am I hearing the message? So they set out to work in the ward of Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one. Oh, recovered immediately. I've highlighted that, I've underlined it. I've circled the ED, recovered, past tense, and immediately. There's another reference to this, you know, at the end of the step 9 promises, it says, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. How committed to this thing am I? Do I understand my step 1? And am I willing to be of service and to be helpful for the rest of my life? Because I believe that if I am, I can recover immediately. The book is telling me this is factual. I'm just actually thinking though, maybe one of the big bookers can help me. I think Bill Dotson did drink again. I'm not sure. I've got a feeling. Yeah, I've got some nodding heads there. I think he did end up drinking again, but it says here that he recovered immediately. So, and they did take a lot of the stories out of the book because people did pick up again. And when we look at the common denominator of anyone who doesn't get permanent recovery, it's always the same: stop working a program, whether it be that step 12, inventory, prayer and meditation, asking for our character defects to be removed, being helpful to others, all of those steps. So recovered immediately and became AA number 3. He never had another drink. Oh, it says that there, but I have a recollection, so forgive me for not knowing that. And that they're talking about Bill Dotson. I will find out that information actually, because I don't like being, my brain gets so full. So this work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. I find that really reassuring as well, because they're saying back in the day that there were many failures, and by failures, I guess it means that they weren't able to keep the people they were working with sober. But what was successful? Bill and Bob, they stayed sober. So am I hearing this message? I need to work with others. When the broker returned, oh, and just another thing on that, you know, I was kind of taught that I'm not God. I'm not responsible for anybody's recovery. If somebody does really well in recovery, that's great. It's not me, it's God. If somebody doesn't stay in the program and work all 12 steps, that's not down to me. I'm not God. People need to have their own willingness to do this stuff. But as long as I have the willingness to show up, the AA responsibility statement says whenever somebody is there asking for help, my hand will always be there to help. So when the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. Beautiful. A second small group promptly took shape at New York to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. So there are lots of references in this book to, you know, this thing taking seed. It's spreading, it's mushrooming, it's growing. There's a new light. You know, our lovely fellow Paige F has I can't count how many book studies she's got at the moment, but one of them is called A New Light for the Dark World of the Alcoholic. I'll just read another paragraph because we've got time. So it was now time, the struggling groups thought, to place their message and unique experience. That's what we're doing. Someone once said to me that my experience in recovery is like a snowflake, that it's completely individual to me, and it's going to match up with another snowflake that looks kind of similar. And that's how it all works. We've all got this unique experience that leads us to the same place. Before the world, this determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, and fledgling means baby bird, so a baby society, which had then been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. And, you know, they were going to call it different things that, I can't remember. I've just forgotten it. A Way Out, that was one of them, but there were already 12 A Way Outs, and they didn't want to be number 13. They were going to call it 100 Men, but then they had Florence R. in the crew, and that wasn't fair. Thank goodness they didn't name it that. It was very exclusive. And they named the fellowship after the book. So the Flying Blind period ended, and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. Okay, that has taken us nicely to the end of the hour. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. I will just wait. Reg, you can